You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are here to discuss everything from June 2nd through the 15th. We are in the early days of summer, or officially still spring, but there is not a ton of news, but there has been some things that have happened over the past 2 weeks, and I know that it has become repetitive for me starting the show saying there's not that much news, but truly and honestly, there really isn't that much news. So we're going to talk about some service updates, and our discussion is actually a question that was presented to us from a listener on our Discord, so we're going to get to that as well. And we're going to start off by talking about HBO Max with ads. So the lowdown on this is that HBO Max with ads actually launched the Wednesday after we recorded our episode, which is amusing because I said I didn't think it was actually going to happen until the following week on the last episode, just because we hadn't heard an official announcement, and then it just popped up. It just was there. It's out there. It's out in the wild. Basically, it's $9.99. It's everything. We already knew all the details about when it was, what it was going to be. It's just a matter of when was it going to happen, because that was the biggest thing. Was we had the details on the price. We had the details on what would be included, what wouldn't be included. So all of that is the same. The same day premieres that are currently available through HBO Max are not available if you have the ad-supported version. That's the biggest difference. HBO content won't have ads. HBO Max originals and the other library content that is available will have ads, but they're claiming and they're promising that it will be the lowest commercial ad load in all of streaming. They're claiming that it will be no more than 4 minutes per hour, which is pretty low in comparison, and that obviously most shows aren't actually an hour, so you're going to potentially see even less. So if you watch an episode of something that typically was an hour on normal television, generally speaking, they have about the runtime for that is about 45 minutes with 15 minutes of ads. So if you only have 4 minutes of ads or even less in comparison, maybe only 3 minutes, you're going to watch those hour-long episodes a lot quicker. So I'm already got an extended membership for HBO Max where it's not going to make a difference if I downgrade, but I don't have any desire at this moment to downgrade to the ad-supported, only because I do want to watch these same-day releases that they have. I actually just watched The Conjuring that just came out on June 4th. Yeah, could I have gone and seen it in theaters? Absolutely. Theaters are reopened. Things are getting back to normal here in Illinois, where I'm at. I honestly didn't feel the need to have to go see it in theaters, and I'm not going to. And honestly, I'm probably not going to go see the next movie, Space Jam, which is the next movie, because my kids want to watch it, and I don't feel the necessity to go to the theaters. Now, obviously, things will change as the same day releases are no longer a thing, but the big question that I want to know is what's going to differentiate the ad-supported version to the ad-free version come next year when we don't have these same day releases. Are we going to see a certain level of content that is available exclusively for the ad-free version, or is everything going to be ad-supported at that point in time? Because right now, that's the big difference, and the big selling point to get you to sign up for the ad-free version is the same-day releases. And next year, while there will probably be some movies that will release same day, the big blockbusters are not going to release the same day. So the question is, what's going to bring people into HBO Max and sign up for the $15 version compared to the $10 version with ads?
Yeah, this whole HBO ad-supported thing, I mean, I'm glad for them. They're going to be people who are going to use it. I'm probably going to be one of those people who are going to switch to the Max after 2020 one, depending on if they do extend the, theater deals and whatnot. But I mean, this is great. They've been promising it for a while. I'm now just figuring out, okay, like how does this play in with the Discovery potential deal? Because as once you work with advertisers, that's a whole lot of things happening there. And then if you're going to merge companies, right, you have a bunch of legalese stuff that you have to figure out as you merge in between the advertising stuff. So I think that's going to be interesting. And I'm not sure that maybe it was the best time to even launch this given the Discovery deal. But hey, I'm glad that they are. I'm curious what the numbers are going to be of the people who will switch and or sign up because of the ad-supported model. This whole promise of the lowest commercial ad load, I think in the same article, it discusses that Discovery Plus, just the Discovery service, has itself like around 4 minutes of ads, so per hour. I mean, is that really the lowest if somebody else is doing the same number? You know what I mean? But hey, good for, Warner Media finally getting this out there, and let's just see what happens.
If you've never had access to HBO content, this is a huge gain, because for $10 a month, you'll have access to that HBO content, and you won't even have to watch any ads whatsoever. As far as the future, I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of people who don't like ads. Personally, I have no problem paying a little bit extra up front to not have to watch ads in general. But I also recognize that there are some services that I use so infrequently that it's not really worth it to pay the extra, in some cases, double the price, because Peacock and Paramount Plus, both it costs double the cost. Have the ads, it's about $5 compared to $10 for the premium version without ads. I don't use those apps frequently enough to warrant having to have no ads all the time. So I think that HBO Max is one of those services where I use it frequently enough that I would probably stick ad-free no matter what. If Disney Plus had an ad version, I would probably stay away from it just because my kids use it and I don't necessarily want them seeing ads. Speaking of which, there was a nice little article that just popped up today saying that the CEO of Disney has specifically stated that they have absolutely no plans for a lower cost ad-supported option for now. And that's not to say in the future they won't. And I think that the deciding factor is going to be as Disney Plus slowly increases their price year over year, because I honestly truly believe that their price is going to continue to rise right along the side of having more content on the service, or original content that is. They are going to raise their price, and they're going to get to a point where they're going to be at a price point where an ad model will work for them. I don't think it will work for them right now, because I don't think it's entirely necessary, because they're already not very expensive as it is. But I guarantee you that we get to a point where there's Star Wars shows and Disney shows and Marvel shows happening all at the same time, releasing all at the same time. It's going to get that price point for the service is going to rise. And when it does, that ad supported model will work for them. But right now, I don't think it's necessary. And that's why they're saying for now, they're not going to be doing it.
Well, I don't think they're going to have a good feeling, at least in the short term. They're not going to go ad supported. And it's, even if they do, accrue more operating costs due to producing more shows at a time, Star Wars, Marvel, all that type of stuff, right? Because Netflix, right, for years has started at a pretty conservatively decent price, and then over years, as they've gotten more subscribers and their growth has been more, they've just slowly increased their price over and over and over. And it doesn't seem like the market's flipped out of like, okay, this price increase is too intense. So I think they still have a lot of room to grow, and they can definitely do the kind of the whole Netflix thing going on. However, from a I'm glad that Disney Plus is not having ads, but if you think about it, Dustin, it would probably be the best marketing thing for Disney, right? Because you already have, especially on the kids side, man, like you already have like great kids content that they will probably experience, come in contact with through different mediums, either as the big movie or it was one of those old shows that you watch, or the Disney Channel, which is still going on, right? You have all these types of things. You can probably sell a crap ton of merchandise by kids harassing their parents about, I want that toy. It's kind of related to this one thing. Oh, hey, here's Doc McStuffins. Do you want the Doc McStuffins like little dollhouse, right? I think that would have been a great marketing opportunity for Disney. And I don't know, I could see them doing that. But from a realistic standpoint, I'm glad that they're not doing that. I think it's a funny question that the CEO has asked. It's like, nah, like, we're not doing that right now. But from an alternate point of view, I think an ad-free tier would be pretty awesome for Disney. And it would just be even promoting their own stuff, right? You don't even get outside advertising partners, just within itself of advertising their content or merchandise or something like that. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to do it. But if they did, I think that they could earn a crap ton of cash from it.
Agreed. And the interesting thing is, back when they had, well, they still have it, but I say this because I don't utilize it anymore, but the Disney Channel or Disney Junior app, they used to have, they still have it, but there was an app that you could simulcast what was on the Disney Channel or Disney Junior and watch things on demand using the app. And as long as you had cable access to these channels, you could log in through your cable provider and have access. And I will say the ads are not exactly the same as what you see on the television. But what's interesting is that it's exactly what you're describing, where like 75% of the ads that you actually do see are relating in some way back to Disney or Disney properties, which is beneficial to them. I mean, obviously Disney has a lot of consumer product partners that make a lot of different specific merchandise and things that you can purchase. And by advertising that stuff in some way to the prime audience at any given moment is going to be huge for them. So you're definitely onto something, because they're already doing it somewhere else, and it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, that something like that could happen for Disney Plus. It's just, like you said, not in the immediate short. All right, so next up, Peacock and Samsung have set a streaming carriage deal. If you use a Samsung television, you will know that there is a dashboard that allows you to use a lot of streaming apps. Peacock has been added to that. Now, this isn't huge news, except for the fact that Peacock, when it originally launched, had a lot of issues. They still have issues with getting onto certain services. They made a deal with Roku, but they're currently not on Amazon Fire devices, but they are available on other devices out there like Google TV and things like that. But adding to Samsung is just another step in the right direction for them to be on potentially be in more households. That's the big thing. And while this isn't huge news, it just shows that these deals, these carriage deals, they are still happening. And if you are holding out for potentially Peacock to end up on Amazon Fire, maybe it'll happen. I'm sure it will happen someday, just not in the immediate future. Honestly, I think a lot of the carriage deals talks that we were discussing kind of got silenced once Amazon and Roku started carrying HBO Max, because there was a huge hiccup when it came to that. But Peacock is kind of just flown under the radar, and I think part of the reason is because it's just not as popular as the service of HBO Max.
See, I actually have a different point of view. I think this is huge for Peacock, and I don't think it's going to be game-changing for the industry, but with Peacock and how that service is, I think its original content's all right. It's been really diving into the world of sports even more. It has its content of like The Office and Parks and Rec, right? Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like those big comedy shows that have been a big staple of NBC's comedy, plans for a very long time, right? That's a very attractive for, viewers. But the Olympics are coming up, right? The other stuff is cool. The other stuff is nice. It gets people kind of in the door, but to really get the service moving forward is Peacock. You have the Olympics. There's going to be ads on the NBC channel, where a lot of people are going to watch the Olympics on there of like, hey, let's promote Peacock, blah, blah, blah. There's that. You also have just it's the Olympics. There's going to be just a whole bunch of people watching the Olympics. And so that's a whole lot of eyes onto your service. And a whole lot of advertising revenue at the stake. So for them to really improve the product and move forward, I think getting themselves on Samsung TVs, right, which is the biggest smart TV maker, I think that's pretty a huge deal for them. I mean, it's just as huge, I think, in the same vein of like, okay, let's get on to like a Roku or Amazon, Fire Stick or whatever. I think it's a big deal for a streaming service, especially one as like young as Peacock. And if you remember last summer, right, in the middle of like COVID and all that type of stuff, Peacock launched, and it was kind of like a lackluster launch, if you remember. And its biggest splash was supposed to be the Olympics, and right, that got canceled. Right, Tokyo, it moved back a year. And just imagine now if they were doing the Olympics and they couldn't be on the number one smart TV maker TVs in the country, maybe the world, but definitely in the US. I think that would be pretty embarrassing. So I think it's kind of a redemption time for Peacock. It's like, hey, we promised we would start on with the Olympics, and we're going to give everybody the Olympics.
And speaking of sports, Amazon has made what they're calling an historic deal to stream Ligue 1 soccer in France. Now, this ultimately means that they're going to be having an insane amount of games or matches. I say games because I am illiterate when it comes to soccer or football. They're basically going to have 302 live matches per season, which basically
That's crazy.
comes out to 8 games per week.
Man, this deal is crazy, right? We've seen other soccer, football matches, contracts for different leagues, and right, I think that they were pretty impressive in their total numbers, but 302 live matches, 8 games a week, 80% of the available games. I mean, that's a huge win for Amazon. I mean, usually they kind of get a slice of whatever sport of the TV streaming space, right? They get kind of a slice of those games, but 80%, that is, I don't think I've seen a deal like this. I mean, have you, as we've covered, streaming sports deals? I haven't seen a deal this huge, and it's kind of taken a monopoly on the on the soccer matches that are televised in France. This is really huge. And what do you think that this says of Amazon's committed to sports? I think we've seen a lot of news about the US in contracts. We've seen some of those. I think that there have been some conversations with the WNBA. There's definitely been conversations with a couple of the European leagues, the Champions or the Premier Leagues or whatever, and now we see them having a really big investment into French national leagues. So what do you think that their approaches to sports, especially in its worldwide context, and it's trying to dominate these different regional leagues that are happening?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it shows that Amazon is committed. I think there's no question that they were already committed to this, the idea of bringing a lot more sports to Amazon, to Prime Video. And honestly, it does come across as they are in it for the long haul when it comes to the amount of different sports. Like, we've obviously seen smaller sports deals. Peacock has been doing their own little thing with getting some sports on there, but nothing that could compare to what Amazon's doing with these deals in place with the NFL. They've got deals in place with certain MLB teams. They've got deals in place with a ton of football or soccer leagues all across the world. A lot of, I think, what they're hinging on is by bringing a lot of sports fans to the service initially, and then obviously as they start to release more and more content, and they get more content as part of this MGM deal, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to come out of Amazon Prime. But I think sports is something that they know right now, especially because they have the open checkbook to basically write the amount of money to make it work for whatever they want it to, in the sense of, sports are not cheap, but sports, they happen consistently. They happen over and over again. There's new seasons every year. There's that repeat viewership that always is happening when it comes to sports. We've talked about this so many times in the past. Sports and news, that's what keeps people to watch, watching live content in general. A lot of the live aspects of purchasing live television, whether you have it through a cable provider, whether you subscribe to a streaming service for live television like Hulu or Fubo or any of the other ones that are out there, there's an array of possibilities of what you can do. But most of the time when you're subscribing to a live option, it's not because you want to watch a show, because you could always watch that show on demand the next day. You're watching it because of sports or news. And Amazon, they're not going to build a news, not that they couldn't, of course, but they're not going to build a news department from the ground up to basically compete with broadcast channels that have been doing this for decades. But sports, however, it's just a matter of paying the money for the rights to air the games and then having the ability to broadcast the games in some way. And as Prime Video grows and becomes larger, it becomes even just a bigger blip on the giant overall radar that is Amazon. Sports is going to really bring a lot more people into Prime Video, is my belief.
I completely agree. Thinking about it from this context, right? We've seen other streaming services have issues of creating content in I guess, non-US markets or non-US audiences, like regional. I think of, the Indian market and trying to produce Bollywood films and shows. I'm trying to get themselves into China and in South Korea. Like, we've seen them invest in new content, but it's been kind of slow rolling moving forward. So I think from a streaming side point of view, it is very hard to develop that kind of backlog of content when your company is based out of the United States. The film industry is dominated by Hollywood, and so you have these other media hubs that frankly don't get their respect in the United States. that are very huge. And we've seen streaming services struggle at entering those markets. And so one option is to buy up the backlog of shows and then slowly slowly developing new content for those markets. Or I think a better option is, right, for Amazon, maybe not for some other streaming services, but for Amazon, if you want to enter these new markets and spread yourself there, right, they're already a successful, retail business. That's definitely a worldwide thing that's happening. It's great. And if you want to even push Prime subscriptions more, instead of investing in original video content, you could just delve into sports rights. And that's going to get people involved. That's going to push subscriptions, and that's kind of getting your foot in the door in that new market. So I think overall, that's a really good move. Business move for Amazon as they really push forward in sports. I think that they're kind of changing the mindset a little bit of how streaming services interact with sports and how that can impact their growth. To kind of bring this conversation to an end about sports. What do you think is the next big sport that streaming services are going to try to fight over, right? We just saw the United States leagues of professional football and soccer, and I think basketball. We've seen the push in Europe for the different soccer leagues and, Premier, Champions, and then, League One. What do you think is the next frontier that streaming services are going to try to fight for?
I mean, you're of course asking this of somebody who doesn't watch a lot of sports, so I'm not going to have a great insight when it comes to this. But if I was going to say anything, I think the deals that exist with the MLB, NHL, and the NBA, there's already deals in place, and I think that over the next couple of years, those are going to, either expire or new versions of them are going to adapt. Because I think my biggest thing, I think that is the future of sports, is the elimination of local blackouts. And I say this, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, a lot of places, for example, CBS, if they're streaming a specific game from the NFL on their network, if you are part of a specific region, you're only going to be able to access that content because that's the content that you would be watching if you were watching on broadcast. You're not necessarily going to be able to access the other two games that they have on at the same time on other CBS broadcast regions. So I think that one of the biggest things that could change in the future is getting rid of the blackout markets, meaning if it's on broadcast, that's great, and obviously that sells well, but I truly believe that there's a reason why streaming opens up the gates. There's certain teams, and I say this because I'm from Chicago, and I'm not from specifically Chicago, but the Chicagoland area, I know that there is a way when it comes to specific teams within the MLB, they're extremely popular because of how they were actually airing the games. So, for example, the Chicago Cubs, they obviously air here in Chicago, but prior to this, they used to be airing on a channel called WGN, which was a singular channel here in Chicago, but at one point Tribune Broadcasting owned it, and they opened up a cable station, and the WGN news that was airing here in Chicago was somehow being simulcast all over the place wherever this WGN America channel was airing on cable. In addition to that, it also opened up the door for Chicago Cubs games to also be airing in a wide variety of areas. So then spring training was down in Arizona, so you'd have fans down there. You'd have fans in Florida because of spring training, or not the games necessarily, but spring training happening down there. You have fans there. But then you have fans spread out all over the place because one of the channels that they could watch, if you didn't have a lot of other possibilities of watching channels, was this WGN channel that aired Chicago Cubs. So that's how it was explained to me as to why the Cubs could be so popular when it comes to why they have fans all over the place. The Yankees are the exact same way. The Yankees were broadcast by a channel that had the rights to the Yankees games, and they ended up in a lot of different areas. A lot of the big teams, the Boston Red Sox, the LA Dodgers, these are teams that tends to happen with, and it's not just because of where they're located, it's because of the deals that used to be in place with the broadcast channels in the local regions, also airing them outside of their local regions. Streaming is the same thing in a sense, where you have the ability to stream games wherever you want. One of my friends who pays attention to sports all the time, whenever there's a game on that he wants to keep on, he's logging on to his phone to find out where he can watch it. If he can't watch it on, a channel on YouTube TV, which he subscribes to, then he's looking for the streaming app that he can. And that's what he's doing. And I think that a lot of these streaming deals can increase significantly. You look at what just happened with the WWE and how Peacock paid an exorbitant amount of money to get WWE content on their service. $5 billion to basically have access to WWE's pay-per-views and the back catalog of content. And that is that's a company that is valued significantly less than professional football, professional baseball, professional hockey. And I think that these deals that have been happening with WWE, who is obviously much more open because they are centrally owned by a singular family instead of spread out all over the place by a variety of different owners. You look at that and you see what happened with the WWE, and I think that is a perfect example of how more sports things can happen. Can you imagine what would happen for Peacock if suddenly they gained this, broadcast rights for every MLB game? It would be huge. Everybody would want to sign up for Peacock here in the States because they could watch any MLB game that they want. However, I think right now a lot of the deals are in place, like with MLB having their own streaming service, NBA having their own streaming service. The biggest downfall is, of course, those blackout markets. And I think a larger streaming service is going to change that if they were to get involved with some of these deals. I think that's going to happen first with the NFL just because of just the sheer popularity of the NFL. But I think that's one of the major things that's going to be the next thing for sports.
Yeah, you bring up good points. I hate blackouts. I'm a big fan of the NFL, and it's really annoying that I can't watch a team that I like that is not the Atlanta Braves or the New Orleans Saints, just because those are the two closest NFL teams to my area. So I definitely do not like regional sports network. I definitely do not like blackouts. So you took that question in a totally different vein. I was thinking like worldwide, like what's a new venture?
Yeah.
What's a new area that a streaming service?
Can't even go there because I don't even know what else is out there.
Yeah, I was. All right, soccer's huge. It's really huge. Baseball is actually another sport it's very big internationally. I know, especially in Japan, baseball is very big there. I was thinking though, you have a lot of people who are like, okay, how can we increase our growth? And if you look at the different markets around the world, right? You have the United States market, you have South Korea, you have Japan, right? Those are normal markets. You have people trying to go into China, but for a bunch of different reasons, streaming services have had, mixed success there. But I think everybody's looking to, okay, what's the next frontier? And it's going to be India. There's a whole bunch of people. It's kind of, I don't like using the word emerging market, but I think from an economic standpoint, I think it is still considered an emerging market, or definitely somewhere between of like a modern and emerging right there, right? You have a lot of people that are going digital. Either smartphones are very huge there. I know definitely Android just dominates the market. You see people for payments using their phones as, for mobile payments and stuff like that. So you're starting to see that culture really go digital first. And I think that there's an opportunity for streaming services to really get a foothold in the India market. And we've seen Netflix actually do a scaled back version of their subscription. I think it was $5, right? We covered this about a year ago, of them launching their Netflix service in India. I think Amazon or just some other big player can really dive into the Indian market and go after cricket. Cricket is a huge sport. I did not realize how huge it was, and its viewership across the world. It's a huge market. And I think Star, right? That's Disney Plus's or Disney's other service that's in India that kind of merged with Disney Plus. I know that service does stream some cricket games, but just imagine like another outside player, right? If you wanted to invest in another sport that has a huge worldwide viewership, could see some streaming company go after cricket as the next big streaming thing, just because I can see its growth. So that's kind of where I was taking the discussion. I was thinking cricket right across the world, and you were thinking in the United States in blackouts and making sure that the local baseball teams can be seen. So I think it's pretty funny where we live, but I think that's the difference between Chicago and little Alabama.
All right, so the last thing that we have is, it's not news related. It's a question that was presented to us on our Discord. It's specifically, there was a question that was presented to us that said, what service, in your opinion, had the worst launch? I'm not going to spend an insane amount of time talking about this, but I will say that there was a couple of hiccups, I think, with a bunch of different ones. But if I had to specifically call out a service or two services, I would say HBO Max and Peacock probably had the worst launches. And I'll explain briefly why. Peacock, it's pretty self-explanatory. They initially launched preemptively to Comcast subscribers with the intent that they were going to launch nationally in the summer ahead of the Olympics. And because they already preemptively launched the service ahead of time, when the Olympics got postponed, they kind of were at a odd position. They could have just kept it going just for Comcast subscribers, but that wouldn't have helped them in general building up something that they obviously spent money creating and getting anybody else to sign up. And it also wouldn't work well to help advertise something that's only available for Comcast subscribers, so that just wouldn't have worked. So the Olympics being postponed was outside of their control, but that I think that definitely hurt their initial buildup. And while they have said over and over again that their signups are great and they're doing wonderful and blah, 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 you know deep down that people within that company were greatly upset when those Olympics got postponed, because that was really the launching point for Peacock to exist. Now we know, here we are a year later, they're claiming that there's going to be over 7,000 hours of content from the Olympics this year, and that they are going full steam with making sure that everything's covered, despite the fact that the Japanese people do not want the Olympics in their country anymore because of COVID, because they've been having their own issues with COVID. That being said, the other one is HBO Max, and I think a lot of this stems from a couple of purposes. I think there was this massive confusion on whether or not you had the access to HBO Max or not. There was the whole mishap with HBO Now, HBO Go, HBO Max, which one's which. They didn't resolve that problem until a couple months afterwards, so there was that initial problem. There's the other problem of, there was a ton of different ways that you could get the service for free, depending on a variety of different things. If you already were an HBO subscriber, if you were a subscriber of certain AT&T plans, it just became extremely confusing, I think, for people who were seeking it out on a whim. It wasn't more of the people who are like, I really want to check out HBO Max because there's certain content that I want to watch. Those people are probably going to go sign up for HBO Max regardless. They're not necessarily going to spend the time trying to figure out, well, even if they did, they would put the effort into trying to figure out where they can go to find the content and if it's available, for free or not. But if you're not, and you're just like, oh, yeah, I like Friends, I want to check out Friends, and you are being told that, there's a chance that you might be able to watch it for free because you're already subscribed to something that allows you to have free access, and then you're having issues logging in, it presented problems. It presented a bunch of problems. There was that massive confusion. Obviously, it would have been better for them to also have the ad-supported initially. I'm not going to say that hindered them initially, but biggest thing for HBO Max is the insane amount of confusion, and it also didn't help that the vast majority, they have so much other content that was in other places. You had DC Universe that had a bunch of the DC content, but that same content wasn't on HBO Max, even though people were expecting a lot more DC content. You had other content like Crunchyroll content that was limited because it's all curated, and now they're not really pushing the curated aspect. They went from having, I think, 10,000 hours to now I saw a recent spot for HBO Max where they said there's 13,000 hours. So somehow they gained 3,000 hours of content in the past year. So the point is, HBO Max probably had the worst one, but as far as outside of their control, Peacock had it probably pretty bad too.
Audience, I don't know if you are like me. I had the same thought process when Dustin was setting this up. He was like, okay, what is the worst streaming service launch? I swear, I thought you were going to say Quibi. We haven't talked about them more.
Man. I just
rest in peace. But man,
I was think about it.
If I had some money, I was gonna bet on you're gonna just start with Quibi and being like, in Quibi, not gonna talk about it, but Quibi, and then you would have just moved on to some other service. So I'm a little disappointed he didn't bring up my dear friend of a streaming service, Quibi. So I'll say it for you. I think Quibi, the CEO, no, said CEOs, but really it's just Katzenberg, made a lot of big promises. It was an interesting idea that I think that the management there got too caught up in themselves to realize that, okay, maybe let's take some outside criticism. You pissed off a whole bunch of mobile users because you couldn't do screenshots, and you couldn't get the social media buzz because you couldn't even like describe what the content was. You couldn't make memes, like all this type of stuff that really generates a lot of social media buzz, which is primarily viewed on mobile, right? And that's what Quibi's all about, is this mobile experience. And they just kind of failed at that. You couldn't stream right to a TV if you wanted to, and that was frustrating, I know, especially for you. So they just had a bunch of different things that took them a long time to get out of their own way. And by the time they did, their money ran out, and nobody believed in them again. So rest in peace, Quibi. I think they had a kind of a terrible debut, but they were their own worst enemy, in my opinion, not necessarily the business model or the content. So HBO Max, I mean, I love HBO Max. I love the content there, and I'm picking HBO Max more than Peacock, or I'm trying to think some others that really kind of floundered recently. Peacock is kind of the one I'm thinking about, and the one that you brought up. I mean, Peacock, it is what it is, right? It's a new streaming service. They had their most popular titles for a long time. Actually on Netflix and some other services, right? And they taken a while to really reclaim those all back. They were going to release the service and really start with the Olympics, and then a few months later they're going to get the rights back to The Office, and then everything would have been pretty fine. So I understand that their plans like totally got blown up by COVID, and that's fair. But really, Peacock's kind of turned itself around. I don't think it's making like big headways in the streaming space, but it feels like it's found its footing. They're expanding internationally, so good for them. I think HBO Max, and I think it's not necessarily so much for the service. I think that they had struggles getting rolling out their product into international markets, and there may have not been a whole bunch of reasons there, but I think that was one of interesting things we realized, just as like Discovery Plus launched their service, and like a month later they were in a couple dozen international markets. That was pretty intense. So if they could do it, then obviously Warner Media could have done something to at least get into like the European market, to Canada, right? Those kind of basic things. So you have that going on, that part of the launch. And then you just had this weird management experience. I mean, I almost feel sometimes as we talk about HBO Max and its leadership, it's like I'm watching like a weird reality TV show. And Dustin, I don't know if you kind of have a very similar vibe, but it's like so much drama that's happening, right? AT&T, chair says this, you have the Snyder Cut, that kind of blows on the Warner Media, film side of things. And then, okay, is there a push to bring that back over here? We're going to have this merger deal. Killar may or may not be staying. So it's just a mess. Oh, yeah. Then he like reorganized, quote unquote, and then just fired a whole bunch of people. That was a big controversy in itself. And somehow through it all, the service HBO Max existed, and it was producing content, and it didn't have a terrible experience. So that's why I'm putting it as a bad launch, is because I feel like it still hasn't gotten it out of its own way. And then maybe with the Discovery deal, it'll help tame down this the streaming side of Warner Media. They have a good product. Ever since the launch, it's been pretty good. They've released new content. I think the biggest success for HBO Max has been Killar's decision to drop the theatrical cuts, the theatrical movies the same day as they're launched in the theater. I think that was a huge popular move, I think, by users and viewers, but definitely not so much in creatives. I think that's like one of the better things to say about their management. It's just been a huge reality TV show, and it's entertaining to cover, it's entertaining to read, but it's not good for business and investors and stockholders. So that's why I say that they're one of the worst launches, is because I feel like at times they're still launching, like they're at the very end of the launch process, right? You have like different phases of things. You start a project, you kind of deliver it off to somebody else, you feel like it's production ready, and then boom, it goes, then you go into maintenance mode and then adding new features. And I feel like HBO Max cannot get out of the like initial prototype phase, and it's as it gets closer to becoming production ready, and then something else happens and you have a lot more drama. So that's why I think that HBO Max kind of has one of the worst launches, in my opinion, besides Quibi, because I think Quibi's is pretty obvious.
All right. So with that being said, I'm not going to disagree and say Quibi wasn't. I just wasn't even thinking about Quibi just because, well, it ultimately failed.
You just blocked out of the mind. Yeah, you just blocked out that part of the last year out of your mind. I get it.
All right. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Streaming Wars. If you are interested in checking out the show notes, which include everything that we talked about here, as well as everything else that happened over the past 2 weeks, be sure to check out our website, thestreamingwars.io, where you will find those show notes and links to all of the articles relating to the Streaming Wars. In addition to that, if you are interested in checking out trailers related to all of the new content that's coming to the variety of different streaming services, check out our YouTube channel, where we have playlists for each and every one of the individual streaming services, where you will find the newest trailers that they are releasing. And if you would like to get in touch with us, we are on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Discord. You can leave us comments also through email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. And you can get in touch with us with topics you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, or give us feedback, or anything else that you'd like to just get in touch with us in general. Outside of that, we're going to stick to our every 2 week schedule for now. But as you can see from this episode, we didn't have a ton of things to talk about, but we did have some things. So these discussions that we could potentially have based off of some input from our listeners would be greatly appreciated, to kind of help fill some of the time to keep us making sure that we have enough content to put out an episode every 2 weeks. Outside of that, that is everything for this episode. Tony and myself, this has been the Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.